In March 1962, the 5 most powerful military commanders in the United States signed a document. The document proposed blowing up American ships, bombing American cities, shooting down a passenger jet full of American civilians, and blaming Cuba. It wasn't written by some rogue agent in a basement. It was a formal military proposal. Reviewed. Approved. Sent to the Secretary of Defense. The plan was called Operation Northwoods. One man read it and said, no. 14 months later, that man was dead. 1959. A 32-year-old named Fidel Castro overthrew Cuba's government and took the island. Cuba sits 90 miles from Florida. Castro immediately aligned with the Soviet Union. Soviet ships docked in Cuban ports. Soviet advisors moved into Cuban bases. And in Washington, the same question came up in every meeting. What if Moscow puts nuclear missiles there? In April 1961, the CIA tried to fix this by force. They trained 1,400 Cuban exiles and sent them in at the Bay of Pigs. The invasion lasted 72 hours. Every exile was captured. The U.S. was publicly humiliated. Kennedy took responsibility in public. Behind closed doors, his military advisors were furious. Cuba had to go. The problem was finding a legal reason. Under international law, you cannot invade a country that has not attacked you first. So, General Lyman Lemnitzer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, came up with a different approach. Make Cuba look like it had. Operation Northwoods was 15 pages. All 5 Joint Chiefs signed it. Here's what they actually proposed. First, a terror campaign in Miami. Bomb Cuban refugee buildings. Sink a boatload of Cuban refugees in the Florida Strait. And blame Havana. Make it look like Cuba was attacking its own people to stop them fleeing. Second, shoot down a civilian airliner and make Cuba take the blame. The method: swap the real plane for a drone, painted to look identical. The actual passengers land at a secret military airfield. Nobody knows. The drone flies the original route and gets destroyed over Cuban airspace. Every newspaper in America runs the same headline the next morning. Cuba just murdered 40 Americans. Every newspaper in America runs the same headline the next morning. Cuba just murdered 40 Americans. Sink a U.S. Navy ship in Cuban waters. The document used the phrase, casualty lists published in newspapers would cause a helpful wave of national indignation. Helpful. That is the word they chose. On March 13th, 1962, Lemnitzer walked into the Pentagon and handed Operation Northwoods to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. McNamara passed it to Kennedy. No transcript of what happened next exists. No recording. What we know is Kennedy rejected it completely. Not just declined. By multiple accounts, he was furious. He told Lemnitzer he had no interest in any military options against Cuba. 1 month later, Lemnitzer was removed as chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Officially, his term had ended, but Washington knew what it meant. Kennedy had stopped it. This time. Operation Northwoods stayed buried for 35 years. In 1997, it was declassified under the JFK Assassination Records Act. Researcher James Bamford published the details in his 2001 book, Body of Secrets. Most Americans had no idea it existed. When historians read it, the thing that hit hardest was not the proposals themselves. It was the signatures. This was not a rogue operation. It was not one unstable general acting alone. All 5 Joint Chiefs approved it. It went through the formal chain of command. The only thing that stopped it from becoming U.S. policy was one person saying no. And that person was shot in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. Nobody has ever officially connected those 2 facts. But the question sits there. The men who signed Operation Northwoods were not psychopaths. They were decorated veterans who had fought real wars. They ran the math and decided that a few American deaths in a manufactured attack were worth preventing a nuclear war with the Soviet Union. They were probably wrong. But that is not the disturbing part. The disturbing part is how normal the process was. A proposal, a review, 5 signatures, 1 approval away from happening. The document is real, fully declassified. The National Security Archive at George Washington University has every page available online. Read it yourself. Then decide what you believe.